One of the things we love to do at 1819 News is to celebrate people, places, and things in the state that are worth celebrating. And today we're going to be doing that, bringing on one of the most successful entrepreneurs under 45 in the state, Nathan Cox, the chairman and founder of 68 Ventures, bringing him on to tell his story today on 1819 News, the podcast. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. I'm Bryan Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we're in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. And something that I'm trying to set a pattern with my podcast, where one week I bring on a legislator or an elected official, whether it's Coach Tuberville or Senator Elliott or whoever, and then I mix that up with just an interesting person in Alabama. And I love hearing stories of entrepreneurs. And you guys heard John McGinnis came on here a few weeks ago. And this week I'm bringing on another very, very good friend of mine, someone who's just from the day we met, we just hit it off and became, best of friends, and has an incredible story. And I mentioned that John McGinnis might be, I don't know how old he is now, but achieved a ton of success before he was 45. And I don't know how old Nathan is, but achieved a ton of success before he was 45. And I would say that that's kind of the best head-to-head of successful entrepreneurs I know of in the state. And I'm going to be bringing on Nathan Cox, who is the chairman and founder of 68 Ventures. I thought it meant he had 68 different businesses, but he's going to get into telling the story of why it's called 68 Ventures. It's actually pretty cool, but he does have a lot of different businesses. And so it was, not crazy for me to think that there were 68 of them. He's also a Marine Corps veteran, has done time overseas in war. And he also played football at the University of Alabama. And so a lot of neat aspects to his story, but he and I got together. We were sitting on down at the pier on his house in Daphne. And I was sharing my story and he was sharing his, and I was just blown away getting to know the man that is Nathan Cox. He obviously, anybody who's as prominent in business as he is, gets a reputation, specifically being a real estate developer. That's always fun. But just hearing his story and how he became as successful as he has, it's amazing. And I wanted to just bring that to you guys. So welcome me in now. Nathan Cox. Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you for having me, Bryan. And your words are humbling. Your friendship's meant a great deal to me, especially with the way it started. But yes. You mentioned another good friend of mine, John McGinnis, been a dear friend for a really long time. He was a couple years older than me at Alabama, and we've stayed close throughout. It's been fun to follow all the success that they've had. And as you know, he was a guest at our Chasing Greatness event this past year as well. So ton of respect for John and everything they do and their philanthropic hearts and just how much leadership he provides for our community.
100%. And it was actually where, so I was at Chasing Greatness and I saw you and him up there talking. I'm like, okay, both of these guys are coming on the podcast. It's just too good. And so in that spirit, the Chasing Greatness, I think that's another thing I want to tee up. Man, you are constantly doing stuff in your community to benefit your community, donating to the community, donating to things in the state. And Chasing Greatness, to me, I think really highlights kind of all of the things that you are all in one thing. It's bringing people together to better everyone, to hear each other's stories. And every year in January, you've had 3, right?
Yes, sir.
And it's basically bringing people from all over Alabama, specifically lower Alabama, as where the primary focus is, bringing entrepreneurs and business leaders in to hear other great stories of entrepreneurs. And this year we even had Katie Britt came in and shared her story that was extremely inspiring. And just to make everyone better. That's what it's about, is making people a better version of themselves, challenging them. And that's been my relationship with Nathan, is he's helping me be a better version of myself, and he challenges me to be better in every aspect of my life. And so I think that sums you up pretty well, Nathan.
Yeah, if nothing else, I specialize in making people very uncomfortable. So that's also a gift God gave me. But no, before we get into everything, the Chasing the Greatness thing has been an absolute blast for us. As you mentioned, we've done it the last 3 years, and we describe that as a leadership and entrepreneurship conference. And this year's past theme was really themed around our mission statement here at 68 Ventures, which is to inspire people to bet on themselves. Our tagline is bet on you. And that was kind of the theme that we had this past year. But the most fun part of that event for me is just getting to show off and introduce, my friends to one another, and have different people who've been mentors and heroes of mine up on stage. I mean, no different than having you do our opening prayer, Bryan.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun for me to brag about you and the fight that y'all take on a day in and day out basis for our country and our state specifically. And that's really what the event's all about. For me, is just getting together people that mean a lot to me, that are super impressive, and sharing them with this community we have down here. But we had people that came from California, New York, Texas, the Carolinas, Virginia. Yep. So every year it's grown, and this next year we're going to have to move to a new venue just because of demand. So it'll be a lot of fun. We've already got some great things in store.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So just like with John McGinnis, when I had him come on, and real quick, so how old are you right now, Nathan?
Yeah, 43, I believe.
43. So you got me by 3 years. So you're 43. I think he's 45 or 46.
Yeah, again, John's 3 years older than me.
Yeah, and you guys have just achieved unbelievable success in both in your respective lanes. At under 45, it's really incredible to see what you guys have been able to do, and so I want to hear your story, because under every story of success, there's so many other stories of how it came to be, and everyone looks and they're like, oh, look, Nathan's got this big house, or he's successful or whatever. But there's a story there. Like, it didn't just happen. And some of the things I've even heard you say, and getting your morning emails every morning, everybody wants the things you have, but they don't want to do the things that you've done, right? And in order to achieve success, that's what it is. It's consistency over time, doing the hard things day in and day out. And that's how you achieve success. And in that, it's not easy. It's hard. And yeah, so that's it. I love stories of entrepreneurial success. It's risk-taking, it's innovation, it's courage, it's all of these things that make it, and it's a very American thing to hear entrepreneurial stories. So where the question I always ask, Nathan, tell us about yourself, where you're from, tell us about your parents, and really high school on to Alabama, and just all of it, and how you got into business.
Yeah, and I'm sure John said the exact same thing, but any perceived success that I've had is all a result of other people and what they've poured into me over the years, and how much they've given me, this organization, my family, to go make things happen. But yeah, starting from the beginning, nothing overly special about me. I was born a very, very privileged, kid to have two parents that cared about me immensely and afforded me a lot of opportunities that most of the world doesn't get. I went to UMS Wright in Mobile from kindergarten all the way through. And that school had a tremendous impact on me and shaping my life. And many of my best friends are still people that I grew up with there. And I'm still connected to a lot of people at that school that mean a great deal to me. My parents divorced when I was 11, and my dad and I moved over from Mobile to Stapleton, Spanish Fort area. We had an old little family farm, moved in, went from a nice house in Spring Hill, which is a very nice neighborhood in Mobile, to a one-bedroom, 50-year-old farmhouse that had rats so big in it that we would shoot them with guns inside the house, kind of thing. I don't want to paint a picture that we were on a, handout for food stamps by any means, but it was a big shock for me. But my dad has always been my biggest supporter and biggest fan, throughout my entire life. And as I say, I feel like our goal as parents is two things. It's one, to give our kids more opportunities than we had, and two, to help make them better people than we are. And my dad has undoubtedly given me more opportunities than he had. I still got some work to do to pass him as far as being a better person. But he has set an example for me throughout my whole life that's given me something to aspire to. And also, you'll see as we go through my story as well, a lot of the things he did with his life ultimately shaped my career and the choices that I made. But again, going back to it, I had one brother who's 10 years older than me that's been involved in real estate down along the coast in South Alabama, really throughout his career. And we've always been, extremely close. For the most part, like any relationship, you have your ebbs and flows, but yeah, grateful to have a brother, no doubt about that. Like I said, grew up going to UMS, private school. I got a new truck when I turned 16. There was nothing that I ever wanted to do that I wasn't able to do. And that to me is a blessing, of course, on the financial side that, we were fortunate, but it's very important to know that, my parents didn't come from anything. They had my brother when they were 19 at the University of Alabama. My dad's dad was an electrician. My mom's dad was a Methodist minister, and they worked their way through school. My dad played football for Coach Bryant, then ultimately went to law school, got his law degree. My mom got her doctorate. All the while, they were raising my brother and working themselves, through school as well to pay for everything. And when Dad got out of law school, he didn't want to practice, and he didn't really know what he wanted to do. He had an interest in going in the FBI, but they were on a freezing hire, and he was back home in Mobile and ran into a buddy of his in the mall, actually. And he was like, "What are you doing, Alan?" And he's like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Well, I just bought a Century 21 franchise for $500. You can be a partner in it with me." And oddly enough, that's how my dad got into real estate. And Dad didn't know anything about it. Started out selling whatever, $15,000, $20,000 houses. And ultimately ended up becoming one of the largest developers in our region. And I'd really say the pioneer for Baldwin County. It was really more of a rural farming community before he came over here and did some transformational developments to include Timber Creek Golf Course. He did 8 Gulfront condominiums down at the beach, Ono Island. He bought out of bankruptcy with some partners back in the late 80s or early 90s and developed that out. But he saw something in Baldwin County way before the rest of the world did. And I think what's so cool and a testament to Dad and who he is he didn't have a background in any of this. Like everything he ever did, he figured out as he went. And he was fortunate that he had some strong relationships when he went to UMS, when it was a military school, from some other families that you would know, Bryan, that are, very well heeled financially, and they backed him throughout his career. And Dad had the same set of partners on everything he did from the time he started to the time he hung it up, which again is a testament to who he is and how he always puts other people ahead of himself. But, circling back to me, my middle name is Luke. My son's a junior, but he goes by Luke. And I've had hanging above my bed or in my office really throughout my whole life, Luke 12:48. To whom much is given, much is required, and to whom men have committed much, they'll ask the more. And so I've always viewed it as I have been blessed. I have had opportunities. I've always had people in my corner when I'm at my darkest moments and my back's against the wall. God has always put the right person in my life at the right time to help me get to the other side. And so for me, I view that as a challenge, the whole expression that pressure is a privilege. And to me, it's a responsibility that I've got to pay it forward. My superpower is my friends. I have some of the best relationships. Honestly, I'd put them up against anybody in the world. And I don't mean dozens of people, being completely candid. I mean thousands of people that I would put in that category. And I think any relationship that begins with, what can I do for you as opposed to what you can do for me, you've got a chance to have something very special. And, I just as an example, our relationship, neither of us have really ever asked or expected anything from the other than to be there, to be their friend, to support them, to let share an ear, when you need it and have your back when things are tough. And if you approach things that way, there's really no ceiling to what that relationship can become and what you can ultimately, conquer later down the road when the important opportunity arises or the need to know who your friends are. Dad always had an expression: when you pick a fight, you better know who the friends are because you're picking a fight with them too. And I think that's something to always keep in the back of your mind, especially as you and I like to say, how many no good SOBs there are, out there in the world too. But fortunately, every time I get downtrodden, some amazing person either shows up or I'm reminded about just how many incredible folks I'm surrounded with, which is definitely my biggest blessing. But going back to it, as I get off on a sidebar, graduated from UMS in 2000. My athletic ability was definitely not SEC football. Football was my life. I'd wanted follow in my dad's footsteps, play college football. I'd worked my tail off growing up, but had to come to the hard reality that once I was a senior, a 4.9 was never going to become a 4.5. My opportunities were more Ivy League, Patriot League, the academies, and was very close to trying to go to the Naval Academy, and ultimately just decided that Alabama meant too much to me. I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps, prove to him that I could do it. So I walked on there. I was an invited walk-on. And for those that don't know, you typically have 5 invited walk-ons in any given freshman class. So got to come in, got to report with the 105, lived with the football players, was treated just like a scholarship athlete, but by no means was my athletic ability anywhere near what those guys were. So
what you were, if I remember correctly, so you did not get an athletic scholarship, but one of the things that anybody who knows you or knows anything about you, you're usually the smartest guy in the room. And did you get a scholarship because of your grades, an academic scholarship? How did that work?
Yeah, so I was fortunate at Alabama. I had a couple things going for me on the scholarship front. Yes, I did have academic scholarship, but also had the Bryant Scholarship, which is a tremendous program that Coach Paul Bryant put in place for his players to where their kids could go to the University of Alabama and have their tuition covered. So I was actually probably getting paid more than a football player back then. Now they get 7 figures, but back then I was actually, probably taken care of even better than them, because of those opportunities. And I do feel like it's an important thing to note that, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I may have the highest pain tolerance and risk tolerance in the room, but it's definitely not intellect. There's no such thing as a scout team fullback and infantry marine that's the smartest guy in the room at any point. I promise you that. But I was very fortunate at Alabama that I made extremely good grades, and I think that was really more of me trying to compensate for being such a terrible football player that I needed something to hang my hat on. So I worked really, really hard at school to make good grades, and that was kind of my thing. With other guys on the team. Yeah, Nathan may not be the best football player, but he is the smartest guy on the team, even though that wasn't true. And I wasn't bad at bar fighting either in college. Thank goodness I don't have any of those anymore. But I had a pretty good record in my prime.
Not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was.
I'd probably just outsource that now, Bryan.
You get me and Wesley to do it?
Yeah, I'd probably get somebody else to handle that for me. But if I had to, don't worry. The Marine's still in me.
Oh, yeah. Well, good stuff.
So, from there, we had the worst record in the history of Alabama football, my freshman class. We came in preseason number 3. We had the number 1 recruiting class, and we went 3-8 that year, and Coach Dubose was fired. Then we had Coach Francione for 2 years, and halfway through his tenure, we got put on probation for sins of the past, and every player decided to stay at Alabama, and then Coach Fran ended up departing us for Texas A&M. So then from there, we got Coach Price, and he made it a couple months before he had some indiscretions at a golf tournament, and so he was out the door before he ever even coached a game. And then we had Coach Shula come in after that. Great man that I thought did a really good job for the university during his tenure. But so all that to say is that, I really don't feel like you can blame me for how bad we were because I didn't play enough. And I think the other thing that really sums it up, you get an extra year of eligibility when you don't play much. And we were in Hawaii finishing up our last game, getting beat by the University of Hawaii. And Coach Sheila was like, Cox, you coming back for one more year? I was like, Coach, I would rather join the Marine Corps and go to Iraq than play another year of football. And that's kind of the path that I went on, lost 30, 40 pounds and went into the Marines right after I got done with football. And, people ask me, where's the inspiration for that? I was always intrigued by the military. That was something that when I was growing up, I was reading books about it. I was watching movies about it. And I always felt like when my generation's war came, I definitely wanted to serve. And I think that's what sparked my interest in visiting all the academies. And really, it was a super tough decision for me not to pursue one of those and walk on in Alabama instead. But my sophomore year, 9/11 happened. And, that hit me between the eyes. I was in the Marine Corps recruiting office the next morning, like, hey, I'm ready to go. Sign me up. Give me a gun, put me on a bus, get me to a plane, whatever that looks like, I'm in. And I started talking to the Marine Corps recruiter, and he's like, man, I've never done this before, but I'm going to try to talk you out of signing up. And he's like, you got over a 4.0 GPA. You're on a full scholarship at the University of Alabama. You're playing football. Like, man, finish your college career and then go be an officer. And, I slept on it for a day or so and really made up my mind then that that's what I was going to do. And selfishly, it was probably because of football. I knew that if I went and left and went into the military, realistically, I would never come back and finish out that dream and close out that chapter the way that I wanted to. And so I decided that while I wasn't going to enlist immediately, that was going to be my goal and objective. So I got into law school, business school for the MBA program, but my heart was serving in the Marine Corps. And I'm not the type that does a lot of due diligence on anything. Once I kind of make up my mind, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. So I didn't ask a lot of questions. And this kind of sums it up. But I got to Quantico, Virginia, for OCS school. And, you're starting to meet everybody. And they're like, so what do you want to do? I'm like, man, same thing you want to do. I want to do infantry. They're like, I don't want to do infantry. I'm like, oh, you're going to be a pilot? Like, no, I want to do logistics. I'm like, what in the hell's logistics? They're like, well, you do know there's 25 different jobs you can have as a Marine Corps officer. And I'm like, no, I thought there was either infantry or air. I didn't know there was anything else. And I was like, so you're telling me there's a chance that I can go do all this and then not even get to serve in the infantry and fight in Iraq? But fortunately, when you're at war and you want to run towards bullets, they tend to give you that privilege. So got to serve in the infantry, went straight from OCS, which is a couple months, into TBS that every officer goes through. That was 6 months. And then rolled into infantry school. That was 3 or 4 months. And then I think I deployed to Iraq a week later when I got done. Greatest honor, my entire life is getting to lead Marines in combat. And any credit you want to give me or pat on the back for my service pales in comparison to these young men and the sacrifices that they made. I mean, I had guys who were 18, 19 years old that were already on their second or third deployment. And at the time, I was probably 23 or 24. I was in Iraq in 05 and 06. And the difference in, life experiences and maturity in a 5 and 6 year gap like that, and thinking about what I was doing at 17 and 18 years old and being in a combat zone and doing horrible things and losing friends and everything else is it's humbling to think about what they gave, this country, for all of us. And just such an amazing story, all the way around that. The friends that I've made in the Marine Corps, some of them. I've got 2 of my roommates from OCS that work here with me. One moved here from New Jersey, another from North Carolina. Guys that I served alongside, still some of the best friends that I have in the world. And I use the example of you got a great relationship with somebody when you don't talk to them for an extended period of time. And as soon as you reconnect, it's like you were together yesterday. And all of my relationships, are like that when it comes to the military, Alabama football, the guys I grew up with. And I think that's pretty special. But talking some more, about the military, side of things, I did an internship. I was in a couple years. Loved being deployed and fighting the fight. Again, being just surrounded by the most amazing people that you've ever met. And honestly, life was pretty simple in a war zone. It's basically try to kill bad guys and keep your guys alive. All the noise and all the other distractions just don't exist. And when you're back in the real world, there's a lot of things that you're dealing with day in and day out, death by paper cuts, per se, on a lot of fronts. So I got out of the Marine Corps a little bit earlier than I had planned. I got hurt in Iraq, tore up my knee real bad, and didn't want to go to the doctor, which would have resulted in me being away from my guys, having to go to Germany. So just kind of gutted it out through the rest of that deployment. By the time I got home, my knee was the size of a basketball, and I couldn't bend it. So I had to have 5 surgeries on it. Spent X number of months on a machine, 18 hours a day, regrowing cartilage. But all that to say is, they kind of told me, hey, you can't deploy again in a combat role. We can move you to a different department. And I was like, there's no way that I can go pay somebody else's, salaries from an office while they're out fighting. I moved on. I never planned on making it a career in the military anyway. It was more about just doing my part. So came back home, was not in a good place. And, this part of the story well, Bryan, just from us sharing on a personal level as close friends. But, I struggled mightily with survivor's guilt. When I got back, I lost Marines that I was responsible for. I lost very close friends. I had more close calls than I could count that I shouldn't be here. And I was here, and others that were counting on me were not. And that was something I had a really, really hard time with. Got to where, I was abusing alcohol. I was trying to pick a fight, whether it was physical or verbal, with just about anybody I could find, and really hated myself. That was the truth of it. Had gotten to where, my faith in the Lord had completely disappeared. And again, coming from a place of growing up, having a pawpaw who was a Methodist minister and always having a strong faith, throughout my life, it was really just the darkest time. And I was undoubtedly falling in the atheist bucket at that point. Thank goodness I had some friends that really cared about me and didn't give up on me and leaned on me. And of course, I always had my dad in my corner. But I use the expression, there's no atheist in a foxhole, and there's none in a delivery room either. So, I met my wife about a year after I got out of the Marine Corps. It was one of those, we went on one date and never spent another day apart from each other, and just kind of knew that that's who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. From that first, initial date with some friends. And, we got married about a year later. And then about 9 months later, had our first daughter, Savannah. And I can remember being in that delivery room and everything just kind of changing, witnessing that experience. And then another, super dear friend of both of ours, John Whitespunner, was really the one that just never would let up on me every day, every week. And, he kind of brought me back to my super strong relationship, with the Lord now. And as it relates to that, I view it as faith is different for everyone. We all got our different views. We all got things that may work for you and work for me, whatever that is. But for anyone listening, if you don't have a strong faith, find something that works for you. And if it doesn't look the same as it does for me or the same for Bryan, like, you got to have something bigger than you to believe in. And you got to kind of have something out there that's just so huge and so meaningful that it connects the dots, because nothing makes sense without a belief in something like that. And I'm not even talking about you got to have my form of Christianity as your go-to, as opposed to some other religion, but you've got to believe in something bigger than yourself. And that's really, kind of what brought me back to being in a place that, very comfortable with where I am, on that front. So shifting to the business side, got out in 2007, which, was an amazing time in real estate. But I was very fortunate because, honestly, the Marine Corps ended up being the best financial decision I ever made. Because, my personality type, I'm kind of all in all the time, and I'm not scared to bet on myself and borrow money, whatever else, goes alongside it. So I have no doubt that if I would have gotten out of college in 2004 and gone straight into real estate, I'd have been bankrupt by the time I was 25. Yeah. And I'm missing those last few years of a white hot real estate market because I was in the Marine Corps. I was able to come back and not be saddled with a lot of problems that other people in our industry were. Now, I had time to make a few bad decisions, but nothing that derailed my career per se. And, that gave me a chance to kind of come back. I started out as a real estate agent and then started my first business, Bellator Real Estate, in 2008. We sold that one last year, I believe, but, grew it from a one-person company to the largest one along the Gulf Coast, or maybe in Alabama. But that was my first business. And absent of that, started kind of going after distressed properties, mainly developed lots or raw land, and then quickly realized I didn't have anybody to sell it to. So that ended up becoming the genesis for Truland Homes, which was our home building company that we sold to D.R. Horton in the summer of 2023. Grew it from nothing to a top 100 builder, and had a wonderful exit with that. D.R. Horton's been a company that I've done business with for almost a decade and a half now.
If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons, it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be Bryan, Bryan.Dawson, Dawson, at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. Talk about your relationship with Mr. Horton.
Yeah, so Mr. Horton was most definitely a hero of mine. I got to spend a lot of time with him on the annual ranch trips that they'll take developers out there to spend time with their leadership team and Mr. Horton himself. And unfortunately, we lost him about a year ago, and just such an amazing man. I mean, I got so many Mr. Horton stories that embody, what he was and what he was all about. But that man cared about his team members, like they were family. And you hear that expression, you always are kind of like, yeah, that's somewhat of lip service or that's optics. But it's the truth. And if you look at the tenure of their leadership team, and even as you move down the chain, it's not years, it's decades. So a lot of our cultural beliefs and stuff stem from my time in the military and athletics, but also viewpoints on what I took away from people like Mr. Horton. And I've got all kinds of, like I said, great stories about him. But
give us a couple.
Yeah, I mean, so D.R. Horton, everybody thinks of course, budget conscious homes, lower end, they're targeting a certain price point. And so, they're not going to be as nice as a Truland home, which was the name of our home building company. But we were out there one day, and I got the opportunity to go ride in the truck with Mr. Horton. And he's like, hey, Nathan, you want to go ride around with me? Now, picture this ranch in the middle of Texas, 150,000 acres. I mean, you could drive in a truck for days and not see everything. And I was like, oh, absolutely. I'd love the opportunity to go spend some time with you. And one of the guys on his team was like, hey, man, you better pack a lunch. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, once you get out there, there's no telling if you'll ever come back. So, I grabbed some Cheez-Its or whatever, and you get in the truck, Mr. Horton, and we've been riding around, all day, and I'm in the front seat and the passenger side, and I've got his rifle from when he was a kid. So, some 50, 60, 70-year-old rifle, whatever it was, and I'm in the front seat, and he'd say, shoot this, shoot that, and we'd pull over, and I'd shoot it. And so we're riding around. I was like, whoa, 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 Mr. Horton, there's a fox and a snare. And so he slams on the brakes, and he backs up, and the fox is alive, just trying to pull itself out of this metal trap. And I was like, you want me to shoot it? And he looks at me, and he goes, well, it's going to die, isn't it? And I was like, yes, sir. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, it's your fox. I mean, you tell me. He's like, well, my daddy taught me to never waste a bullet, and puts it in drive and keeps going. And I was like, man, I hope I never get sideways with this guy. But that's the way he thought. And that culture trickled all the way down throughout his organization. And it's why it's a $50-60 billion market cap home builder and the largest one in the country today. So continuing on, and I don't want to keep going down this road too long. I want to let you ask some questions. But
sure.
So started Bellator Real Estate and Truland Homes, and then about 2011 or probably 2012, I'd kind of run out of financial horsepower. Wasn't able to borrow any more money. Was tapped out on my own personal resources, but saw an opportunity to continue to grow our organizations. So I went to some of my close investment partners and mentors who were longer down the road in their career and much more well-heeled financially, and kind of shared with them my vision and said, I see an opportunity to grow 10 years worth of progress in the next 12 months if I had some bullets to fire. So ended up getting those guys, on board. And we formed Battle Plan Capital in 2012. At the time, I was a 35% owner of that company. My plan was vertical integration, trees to keys as it relates to the real estate world. So being able to buy a piece of property, have a vision for it, go develop it, have a home building company that builds the houses, a real estate company that markets the house, a title company that does the closings, a mortgage company that loans you the money, the landscape company that cuts the grass, the plumbing company that goes and services, your sink, all the way down the line. But about 2016, I don't know, we probably had 4 or 5 businesses at the time. We had kind of reached a capacity with my partners as it relates to their guarantees on what they were willing to sign for loans. And I had been for at least a year or two, signing the loan myself and not even asking them to, because they were very transparent up front that they had a ceiling, and once they hit it, they didn't want to go beyond that. I mean, the only debt they had in their life was with me. So I respected that. And those guys, again, had been nothing but genuine and generous to me on all fronts. But I'd gotten to a point to where the banks wouldn't loan me any more money because I only owned 35% of the business, but I was signing for 100% of the liabilities. So, the risk reward there for them just didn't make sense. So I went back to my partners and said, hey, I want to keep going with this thing. I love the development side. I feel like we're just getting started, but here's where we are. So either I need y'all's help, signing on more debt, or we need to sell this thing, or y'all need to buy me out. And of course they said, we only got into this because of you. So tell us what you want to do and we'll do it. And I was like, well, I want to keep going. All right, great. Come up with a proposal and we'll go from there. So I went and tapped every, relationship that I had to go borrow money on a handshake kind of thing, or, go get a second, third mortgage on whatever properties I could, borrowed against the truck. I mean, anything I could find, caught in the favor with dad, whatever that was, to try to get the money together to go buy them out. And that could not have happened if it wasn't, again, a result of amazing relationships where people have always been there to have my back and help me, get to the other side or accomplish whatever I had seeked out to go do, as well as just the grace that respective partnership, showed me to afford me that opportunity. And from there, we formed 68 Ventures. That was in 2016. And people often ask, like, hey, Nathan, I know you're real slow. Was 68 your football number? I was like, no, believe it or not, like I didn't play offensive line. I may not have been that slow, even though people like Wesley were faster than me, and he was 100 pounds bigger. Again, says a lot about my athletic ability. But that story came from a talk I had heard Dr. Kevin Elko give. And he was telling the story of what's your 68. So it's actually derived from a hockey player, believe it or not, Jaromir Jagr. And for those of you in Alabama that don't know anything about hockey like me, Jagr was the equivalent of the Michael Jordan of the hockey world. And he wore the number 68 to remind himself that he plays for his country, he plays for his family, he plays to honor himself in that spirit, because his grandfather was killed in the 1968 Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia. So it wasn't for money. It wasn't for fame. It wasn't all the things that come with that. It was for something bigger than himself. And I thought that was a pretty cool story. And so I spent a lot of time thinking through my own personal 68, and it still holds true today. My 68 comes from all those who've sacrificed for me to be where I'm at today, and all those counting on me going forward to carry out the plans God has for me. So when I get tired, when I get in a bad place mentally, or I don't want to do the right thing, that to me is what I can kind of fall back on. And we encourage everybody here to have their own personal 68. And depending on what stage of life you're in, it's going to be different for anybody. And if, getting a new boat is the most important thing for you right now because you're 25 and you don't have a wife and you don't have kids, then great. Make that your 68 and go do whatever you need to do to go make it happen. So it can evolve over time. But for me, it's been a really profound driving force for the decisions I've made, for the things that I've tried to push the needle on. Is I've been blessed with so much, whether it's a result of my parents or just the other people that God has put in my life, that I've got a responsibility to go do something with it, to where I don't rest on whatever, success yesterday afforded us. It's more about what can I do today, to help somebody else and make us better as an organization, as a family. And man, I'm a sinner. I'm a flawed human being. I've already screwed up 100 times today. And I think that's the coolest part about having faith is, you get to say, I'm sorry and I want to do better. And if I could leave my kids with one thing, if I'm on my deathbed, it's you do the right thing for the right reasons. And when you mess up, you do the next right thing. And that's actually our company ethos, to do the right thing for the right reasons. And there's never been someone here who's been fired or gotten their butt chewed up and down because they made a mistake, as long as they can show me where their heart is when they made the decision. Now, try not make it again. Let's learn from it. But if that's what ultimately things fall back to, then we're always comfortable with it, because I am not perfect. I've made millions of mistakes thus far, and I've got millions more to go. But on the work side, we did get up to about 18, I think, businesses at the top. When we decided to sell Truland Homes, we were able to give opportunities to other partners of ours to kind of have their own thing and run with it. That businesses that didn't necessarily make sense for us once we got out of the home building business, things like title, things like mortgage. We also had a custom home building company that we got out of as part of that transaction. But that's probably some of the most fulfilling parts of my business career, is being able to go have opportunities like that for other people that I care about a tremendous amount. But today, I think we're 10 operating companies, but the preponderance of what we do is development based. We're the largest single family developer, I would guess, in Alabama and along the Gulf Coast. We do thousands of lots a year. 95% of those today are for D.R. Horton. They've been so good to me, this company, my family, that we're extremely loyal to them. But we do have some other really good builder relationships in that space that we enjoy getting to work with when the opportunities afford themselves. And we've got a lot more stuff in the real estate world that we're involved in, whether it's self-storage, light industrial. We've got a couple new master plans here down in Baldwin County that we're extremely excited about. We've got marina operation, dry storage, build to rent townhomes, multifamily. So a lot of different things in the real estate world. But the last thing, as I'd say, is when we sold Truland, we did make a strategic shift from the vertical integration to truly a development and investment company. And so even if we do have 10 operating businesses, we view those operating companies as investments from the perspective of, we believe in the person that's running that, the person that's our partner. And our job is to provide them with resources, mainly financial, relationships, and then wisdom earned through the mistakes that I or we have already made, opposed to in the past where we were really trying to be a true operator. We were in the meetings, we were doing the hiring and firing, we were part of the strategic plan in an intricate level. But today it's more about those people are badasses and we believe in them. And, you'll find with me, and hopefully Bryan can already attest, I live by the Marine Corps mantra of no better friend, no worse enemy. And, I try to always be the best partner anybody will ever have. And I really think that's the secret sauce for what we have here. From a cultural perspective, we are who we are. We're authentic. We are sinners. We own it, but we're all trying to do better each and every day. And that's the fun part for me, is that I love the risk element. I love things that give me butterflies, and I'm always chasing that. But seeing somebody and giving them an opportunity that so many others gave me, that's really what gets me going. If it wasn't, then I could probably call it a day and be just fine the rest of my life. But I really couldn't think of anything more miserable, to be honest with you.
Man, it's an incredible entrepreneurial journey. And one of my favorite things about you, Nathan, is you are a storyteller. Another mutual friend of
ours,
John. Are you
saying I'm full of crap?
No. You have a gift at being able to tell stories and making them engaging. And a mutual friend of ours, John Croyle, also has that gift. He's a storyteller, and he's just got that gift. And I'm thinking back on some of the stories that you told me. I'm trying to figure out which ones we can say on the podcast.
Yeah, and just for the record, Mr. Croyle is a hell of a lot better man than I am. There's not even a discussion there. Brody's one of my closest friends, got to play with him. And just what an amazing thing that family has done for so
Amen.
many. I mean, Big Oak Ranch, if you're not familiar with it, please go Google it. If you ever feel sorry for yourself, give Brody a call and he can set you straight real quick.
Yeah, he'll give you a tour. Yeah, no, it is. I've had John Croyle on, and then I had Brody on, and John, I think he got 50,000 views on the podcast he did with me, which is still the biggest podcast I've ever done. Was with John, and then Brody did not, and I titled that one because it was a competition to see if Brody could beat John. I said, "Don't let Brody get sacked." And again, if most would get that joke, honk if you sack
it's a
Brody.
good way to get Auburn people to click on it.
Yeah. So, going back, there's a lot of, I want to talk about some of your philanthropic efforts and, your, like you talked about the Bible verse that says, to whom much is given, much is expected, and the way that you give back. That's well, let's talk about that. And then I want to go back and just hear some more stories. So, it's obviously, you're very passionate about giving back. Even the things that you do, that are investments are still providing something of value for people. But you are a very philanthropic person. You're someone who cares deeply about your community, about your state. What is it that drives a lot of your philanthropic efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got that from my dad. He set up a family foundation back in the mid 90s, but even from the time I was a kid, he and my mom were always about what can you do for others. And dads live by the simple, code that if you can help, you're supposed to. And you already heard what I said about the secret to relationships is if you start all of them with what can I do for you versus what you can do for me, you can have a pretty amazing life as a result of the people. And for me, the secret of life is relationships, experiences, and whatever makes you feel alive. The money, it comes and goes. And I know it's easy for me to say because I've been blessed financially, but that's never been a driving force for me. It's always been more about the challenge, the sense of accomplishment, or setting a goal, which whether that's a house on the bay or a new truck, whatever else it was more about the challenge as opposed to actually like needing and wanting that. But on the philanthropic side, I do love where we live, and there's so many amazing people here at a local level, at a state level. And so we do have a family foundation that my dad and I do together that we support a lot of local charities in South Alabama. And we do have some events that we do as a company. You already mentioned Chasing Greatness. We have another one that's actually coming up May 10th called Ballin' on Belrose, and it'll be the 4th year that we've done that. And that's to benefit the Baller Dream Foundation, which is very similar to a Make-A-Wish type program, except it goes to adults up to 29. And it's also a long-term relationship. It's not just a one-and-done experience. My good friend, Frank de Blasi, founded that. And I recently got on their board. And you know me, I don't do boards. So it should tell you
impressive.
how much I believe in that
I was gonna
organization.
say.
Yeah. And then we've got the 68 Ventures Bowl, which we did this last year was our second year doing that. And that's here in Mobile, Alabama. That means a lot to me, just being somebody that played college football and was not a very good football player. But even my friends that were all SEC, all American, played in the NFL, none of them have a bowl game. So at least I got that to kind of hang my hat on with them. But in all seriousness, that's just been a ton of fun for us to be involved in this community and how much that they do, to give back on that end. And so those are some things that are kind of bigger and more important to us. But again, I think it all just goes down to whatever it is that you can do to help, you do it. And you don't worry about who gets the credit. You don't do it to make you feel good or look good optically or change people's perception of you to where all of a sudden maybe somebody likes me that didn't before. That's not what it's all about. It's a lot more fun to give it away than it is to make it, to be honest with you. And if I'm driving around daydreaming, it's not some other new material possession that I want. It's typically something that I can do right here in my own backyard in Old Town Daphne for my community. It's where my house is, my office is, my wife's restaurant, Press & Co., is my kid's school, Bayside is here. My daughter's acting program, Eastern Shore Repertory Theater. So anything I can do to re-recruit my kids back here one day is something that's really, really important to me. And that's the thing that we think about a lot as a company is what do we need to do? What do we need to be involved in, whether it's creating opportunities, whether it's developing amenities, whatever that may be, to raise the bar to where our kids can come back here, because they're going to have opportunities to go other places, see other things, be affiliated with bigger cities, whatever that may be. So if we don't continue to step up our game down here, I'm going to lose them one day, and I don't want that to happen. As our commercial said, I want them to go out and see the world, but I want them to choose to come back here one day.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. There's a part of me that wants to tease out the stories for an overtime segment that we do often.
You know me, I'm an open book. I'll tell you anything.
All right, let's go into some of my favorite stories. We were talking the other day about you being the 4.0 student in the University of Alabama, and how that, wouldn't say you were taken advantage of, but just some of the stories of the not so excellent academic football players and how that went.
It's funny. We went up for practice last week, took my son, and I had another couple guys that I played with, either went up with me and met there. And my roommate, David Cavan, who still lives in Tuscaloosa, who played tight end up there, he actually made the comment, Bryan, along that story. He goes, "You remember when I cheated off you on a test and you got 100 and I got an 88, and I complained to the teacher on how we could get a different grade if I copied you?" But I think I was telling you that when I had the bigger classes, I would sit down on the front row, and then you would see it staggered at a 45-degree angle all the way to the top with other athletes, and the grades got progressively worse as you got further and further from me. So there were a lot of people that were paying attention to my schedule and what classes I was in. And, the other one that we were talking about with another football player, I won't name him, but my freshman year, I think he was a senior or fifth-year senior, and he had failed calculus I don't know how many times and needed to make a good grade on the final exam to pass. And it was the only class he had left to graduate. And I had a, high A in that class, and the test was write out, show your work. And I got finished with it and went to get up, and he grabbed me and set me down and grabbed my test and handed me his. And so I finished his test, and I got a note from our teacher who, and again, like, my friend was 6'9", 360 pounds, huge human being. And our teacher was a little Asian man. And he sent me an email and said, "I wanted to congratulate you. You made a perfect score on the final exam. You got the highest grade in the class, and your big friend did pretty well too." And he did a smiley face. So it was kind of like, all right, yeah, I get it. But
oh man, that's good. What are some of the other, just in your life, everything from, playing the University of Alabama, doing that, being in the military, the Marines, what is kind of, as you look back, what is the most shaping moment or person that you've come in contact with, or like, what is, the transformative, I don't know exactly what the word that I'm looking for is, but I think you see where I'm going.
Yeah, no, I'd say the Marine Corps had the most impact on my life. I joined the Marines like, all right, I'm about to get my act together. I'm about to grow up. And all I did was meet a bunch of guys that were just as crazy as I was.
Yeah.
But man, like, learning their hearts and why people were called to serve. Like, every one of us wanted to wear the uniform to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, and I also learned about leadership. Being an athlete, I'd always thought it was first one there, last one to leave. You perform in the game. I was team captain. Like, that's what being a leader was. When I got in the Marine Corps, that is nothing what leadership is really about. Leadership is only really about putting everybody that you're responsible for ahead of yourself. And if your Marines know that every single thing you ask them to do, you're willing to do alongside them, and every decision you're making is to protect them, to put them in the right spot, they will do anything in the world for you. They will storm buildings with terrorists inside. They will keep going when their friend has gotten shot in front of them. They'll run towards artillery fire or bombs that are going off just because you ask them to. So I've tried to carry that with me in everything, that I do, is put everybody else ahead of myself. And it's amazing what they'll do to look after me. I've got some of the most loyal people in my life that would do anything for me just because of that. Not that they even want anything in return, just so they know I care about them that much. And even though you and I had known each other forever, we've quickly formed a friendship that's right in that same bucket. I don't know one thing that you've ever asked me to do that immediately, how can I jump in and be an asset? And I have no doubt that if I ever called on you and said, I need you today, you'd be there for me. And I think that's really what life is all about. But I mean, you go back and it's almost impossible to say, and here's one person or here's one moment. It's just a culmination of things. But really, like I would say personally, the most growth that I ever had in my life was in my mid to late 30s. I'd started making a little bit of money, had started developing an ego that I was this important person that makes it rain and everybody else is benefiting because of me. And, God will humble you if he needs to. And I started becoming somebody I didn't really like. And what's funny too is back then I really hadn't accomplished anything. I thought I had, but I really hadn't. And I got arrested on a Tuesday night for a public intox, right here in Daphne. Going out with some guys that I worked with. I ended up sliding over somebody's parked car doing a Dukes of Hazzard and just messing around. And they told me I had ruined their car kind of thing. And, got loud and told them their car sucks and maybe threw a couple $100 at them and said, here's for your car kind of thing. And so, as I started to sober up in the Daphne jail, it's like, man, I have all these wonderful things going for me. A wife, amazing kids, this incredible business, so many people that care about me. It's like, is this really, who I want to be and what I want to be about? And I didn't have a drink for 3 years, as part of that. I do drink every now and then today, and it's still something that every time I have a sip of alcohol, I'm super cognizant of the behaviors that run in my family and for me personally. So I'm very selective on when and where that would even happen. Yeah. But for me, that was like the start of an introspective, time in my life where I wanted to go deal with the things that had shaped me, whether it was childhood trauma, from parents, or what I dealt with my older brother who's had addiction issues since I was a child, whether it was PTSD, from the Marine Corps and my time in Iraq, go down the whole list and started doing a lot of work. Whether that was just internal time, me, I like to do crazy things. I went and stayed in a cave for 5 days by myself a couple summers ago out in Oregon. Same thing Aaron Rodgers did. I'm a big fan of plant medicine, hallucinogenic type therapy in controlled settings with doctors and experts. And that's something I talk to every politician about when it comes up, is how many benefits that I believe are out there for our service members or those struggling with addiction or trauma, that we're being closed-minded about being able to open and provide that resource to people. And it's funny, like I'm talking about this on a podcast, somebody's going to hear it and be like, I cannot believe that you talk about that stuff. And it's like, it's helped me. I've never been a recreational drug user ever. Anything I've ever done has been for a therapeutic purpose to become a better person. And it's helped me. So why would I not, share about that? But that was really a time in my life where I think I started making some changes to where I was okay with myself. Like I sleep really well at night. I don't sleep long. But when I put my head on the pillow, there's not typically a lot of regret on how I've treated people or why I made a decision I did. That doesn't mean I'm without flaw. I fail all the time, and failure doesn't bother me. Not taking the shot is what bothers me. But something not going my way, that's never been a problem for me. And, you were very gracious by saying how smart I am. That's really not the case. My biggest competitive advantages is I would argue nobody has a higher pain tolerance than I do, and nobody is willing to take more risk, than I am. And I don't mean that in a reckless sense, but I'm one that always believes if you give me enough time, I can always come out, a winner on the other side. Wow. And that's kind of the Simon Sinek infinite game type mindset that, as long as I'm not dead, you will not beat me. And I used this example a few weeks ago with somebody that I was kind of sideways with. I said, you got to remember, I was trained to give my life for my country. And not only was I trained for that, I was willing to go do it. I was fully prepared to die at any time for my Marines and for this country that I love so much. So know that that's who you're up against. You're up against somebody that's prepared to die for what they believe in. Are you? And the odds are they're not. So, again, nothing real special about me other than the people I've got in my life, and those other two character traits. But it's been a hell of a ride. I'm 43. I've gotten to live a lot of years in those 43 years, and I'd like to say that I'm just getting started. Not only on the 68 Ventures side with the people that I've got here that I believe in so much, but also personally, I got a lot of things that I want to help be a part of to make the local community better, our state better, and ultimately our country. But my passion and commitment definitely starts at home and goes out from there.
That's awesome. Well, man, that puts a nice bow on it, I think, Nathan. I appreciate you giving me an hour of your time to tell your story to our listeners. Again, it's something about entrepreneurs and exactly what you said, that the innovation, risk taking, that provides businesses, that give people jobs, that provides a tax base and all of these things. It's what makes the world go round, and not everybody can do it. And there's just something about hearing the stories about how people got to where they are in a business setting is just fascinating to me. So thank you for being so open and telling some of the darker parts of your story as well as the highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would tell anybody too, if you're curious about what we do and how we've got here, our website has got a ton of great information on it. I wrote every word on that website. So that's my voice that you're reading and seeing. And then also reach out to me at any time. My email's ncox@68ventures.com. It's how I spend my time, is meeting and connect with other people on the relationship side and seeing how I can help you along your journey, whatever that looks like.
Awesome. Nathan, again, thank you so much. And for the rest of the audience, as always, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.